And so actions are needed now because we cannot continue to lose our strong and resilient Indigenous women, our girls, and our 2S LGBTQIA+ loved ones. So in terms of who we talk to and how we know, or the method, so a bit about our steering committee. So in order to address the final report on the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and to develop a response to the 15 calls for justice directed at social workers and those implicated in child welfare, the Indigenous Child and Family Service Directors established a steering committee in April of 2020. We utilize the processes of the APPF and our knowledge gathering, including gathering our circles, gathering our circles, listening, assessing and finding solutions, creating safety, security, and well-being, and keeping our circle strong. You can see that represented in that outer circle there. We gathered our partners to share collective wisdom, experiences, and resources with the intention of advancing the implementation of the calls for justice. This included ICFS directors and agency reps and advisors, the Ministry of Children and Family Development, specifically Strategic Policy and Research, and the APPF team. Also, Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, Indigenous Relations and Policy Directorate, and Indigenous Services Canada, Child and Family Services. So the knowledge gathering was focused on best practices or wise practices. We just had this conversation yesterday about these words. The steering committee intended to capture a bird's eye view of how Indigenous Child and Family Service agencies have been responding to the calls for justice and the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We sought out wise practice, challenges, and recommendations. Learning from and supporting Indigenous-led practices that have been responsive to the crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and 2S LGBTQIA+ is a way in which we can advance innovative practices across this province and drive restorative policy and legislation to create a system of change. Our knowledge gathering centered around 10 key areas of practice, which contribute to a holistic wraparound system of support for communities. The 10 key areas were identified through an analysis of the 15 calls for justice and further aligned with the Indigenous Child and Family Service Directors' 4 guiding principles, which are also here in the visual. And those principles include culture-centered, inclusive, collaborative, and accountable, resiliency, healing, and wellness-focused, child, youth, family, and community-centered. We connected with 15 of 24 Indigenous Child and Family Service agencies through our sessions, which included a campfire session, one-to-one agency interviews, and practice, policy, and funding discussions with directors. What we learned in the process: within our steering committee and across our knowledge gathering sessions, we learned about working in partnership and being intentional and adaptive in our approach. We also heard and recognized the vital need to bring men into this work, as we spoke about earlier. We know that the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls will not be resolved without our men. They play critical roles in the protection of our women, our girls, and our children overall. There's a lot of work happening across Turtle Island around murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Many movements are bringing awareness, whether it be through marches, walks, or social media platforms. There's a lot of conversation unfolding and various planning underway. There also appears to be little cohesion. So much of this work is happening in silos. And in 2022, there's still no concrete action. Our women continue to go missing or have their lives taken from them. And so we need a plan led by Indigenous women, and we need resources to enact the plan. So in terms of what we're recommending from this steering committee, the report prepared by the steering committee provides an overview of practice and system recommendations across the 4 principles previously identified. It demonstrates the work that is underway, as well as the supports, policy changes, and funding that are needed to expand and further build upon Indigenous practices. The two that we will highlight today include the need to acknowledge the significant role the child welfare system plays in perpetuating ongoing harms, and the need to include child and family services within the responses for the ongoing crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We have heard at other tables comments such as they, our mothers, can't reconcile losing their children, generations of women who are missing from their spirits. We know that when we are not connected, we are more vulnerable. And to strengthen our families and communities and to be able to foster connections for our children, our youth, and our people, prevention initiatives are critical, both on and off reserve, and must be equitably funded. We must remove government-mandated organizational parameters and increase the autonomy of those serving and supporting Indigenous women and girls and the 2SLGBTQIA+ people. We are the experts in our own lives. Our Indigenous Child and Family Service agencies carry nearly 40 years of knowledge and experience in working directly with children, youth, and families, and must be provided the autonomy to practice in the way that makes sense for our people. We require greater ability to develop and implement innovative and culturally rooted services specific to the needs of our communities. Also, an equal partnership with Indigenous Child and Family Service agencies is necessary to build the path forward to reconciliation. So in terms of what you can do today, one thing that you can do today, we ask that you commit to reviewing our full recommendations document when it becomes available on Our Children Our Way website. We ask that you share the information widely. We ask that you generate discussions regarding these recommendations with everyone from frontline practitioners to decision makers and policy changers. And finally, we ask that you prioritize the safety and well-being of our women because our lives depend on it. And so before I step away and leave all of the questions for Kayla and Lori, I just want to ask our beautiful Indigenous women to stand. Alicia. And I just want you to put your hand on your heart. And I just want you to say out loud, I am loved.
I am loved.
I am sacred.
I am sacred.
And my life matters.
My life matters.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We'll take some questions, comments, reactions. We have Tracy has the mic if you want to speak into it so that people online can hear you. And if you're online and you want to make a comment, just use the hand raise feature and we'll call on you.